Hello everyone and welcome to the Melbourne Traditionalists episode 58. Today I'm going to start off talking about the comments that I receive on the Melbourne Traditionalists channel, the YouTube channel, and I'm going to be particularly concentrating on Anita. And Anita has sent in three comments over the last month, and two of them I'd like to delve into in greater detail. But apart from one person who I have actually banned from the comment, whenever I see their comments I will just delete them because they're a troublemaker. Other people's comments are actually really good, and if you want to leave comments or thoughts, I'm very grateful to receive them, and I like to read them. I might not reply to many of them, but I do read them. Now, Anita has put in a comment on Future Path, which was episode 56, and she's written, "Great philosophy. I align with almost all your ideals, but I don't live in your state, let alone council. I think that's why federal seats in Senate seem to be a strategy, perhaps attempt to infiltrate a party close to your ideals." So we'll go through each part of that. Great philosophy, thank you. I align with almost all of your ideals. The only word that's wrong there is almost. But I don't live in your state, let alone council. Well, what I suggested was that one of the mistakes that we make is that we look at the federal parliament and we concentrate our ideas and our dreams on getting into federal politics, where we probably should start lower at the local level, at local government, and actually try to get onto our local council. And the point about not being in the same state and not being in the same council, well, they're valid points. And I think that we need to set up our own local groups. And that's certainly what we've tried to do with the Melbourne Traditionalists, and we have been successful. It's taken us a long time. It's certainly not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's very slow and a bit tedious. But to be honest, you need good people more than lots of people. A lot of organisations set up very quickly, like Fraser Anning's party, and then they disappear very quickly. And what you need to do is build or plant deep roots. So what we did was we recruited people from Mark Richardson's website, Oz Conservative, from my website, Upon Hope, and we would meet people in real life, and we would get to know them. We would go out and have a meal with them, and get to talk about what their political philosophy was, what ours was, and our success rate's about 50%. And actually, that's a good thing, because you don't want people joining who are joining because they think that you're something that you're not. We're not the Liberal Party, for example. So you will meet a lot of people who are basically Liberal Party members, for want of a better word, who are disappointed with the Liberal Party. They're a bit more hardcore than the average Liberal Party. And they'd like them to be a bit tougher, but then that doesn't make them a traditionalist. Now, Anita is, of course, a woman. So, you think to yourself, well, maybe most people who are interested in this kind of thing are men, and that's true. But there's no reason why you can't set up a female group. And the Melbourne Traditionalists started with two people, myself and Mark Richardson, and it took us 6 months before we got a third person. And so you can start small. All you need is two people to start a group, and you have to be realistic. if you don't have a friend or an acquaintance whose politics are very close to yours, then maybe you know people who are socially traditionalists. They live a traditional lifestyle, but they're not really that political. Well, that's all right, because do you really need to be that political to get involved in a letter writing campaign, for example, or to support local candidates who you like? The great thing about joining a candidate and supporting them is that you actually get to meet real people. And then you can have private chats. And if you find out, these people aren't really my kind of people, well, that's all right. You can go join another campaign. And if you find that, hey, actually, these people are pretty close to what I think, then why not set up your own group? And you can start as a social group. You don't have to change the world. What you really want to do is set up a group that is aligned to what you think, to what you believe, so that effectively a political friendship group. I hope that makes sense. Further in the letter, you said, I think that's why federal seats in Senate seem to be a strategy. This is the thing. I did some. I participated in a campaign. I helped a woman who was running for Parliament, and I basically just handed out leaflets and was there on the election day to hand out how to vote cards. But what it got me thinking about was actually how this all works. And she ran in a seat where there were, was it 7 or 8 candidates? And I thought, that's absurd. She should run in a seat where there's 2, where there's just Liberal or Labor or, something like that. And she's the protest vote. Because what you want is 5% of the vote. Once you get 5% or more, then you start to get funding. So that's the very first step. The first step is actually running. And the second step is actually getting funding. So what we concentrate on is winning a seat, winning an election. We're so far low, so far down, that to think like that it's a bit delusional. And we do, as a movement, suffer from a little bit of that delusion. And, if we can get a little bit of funding from the government, that's a big win. But then I thought to myself, all right, to get into a federal seat, there's 90,000 people in an electorate. 90,000. So, assuming everyone turns up, you need 45,000 people to vote for you. That's a big ask. How do you advertise as a small candidate to 45,000 people? A state seat in Victoria is about 20,000 people. Now that's a lot more manageable. It's still a big job, but it's much more manageable. A local government can be as low, a ward can be as low as 750 people, up to 10,000. 750 people, that's actually manageable. That's actually doable. You could actually print out 750 vote for me cards and canvass your area. You could actually door knock a good portion of those 750 people, and all you have to be is competent and pleasant and not be too much of a rat bag, And a lot of those people will say, yeah, I'll vote for that person because I know them. And actually, then when you run for state, you've got an area where people already know you. And the same for federal. So you have to start small and work bigger. And I understand why people want to go for the Senate seats, but we've all seen the Senate paper. I'm not sure where Anita lives, but in Victoria, it's more than a metre long. I think there were over 100 candidates for the Senate, and how many senators are there? 7. That's a big job. That's actually a lot harder than even running for a House of Representatives seat where there's only two candidates, because your chances of actually getting 5%, that's actually pretty good, because I'd imagine that it wouldn't be too hard to generate 5% protest votes. Perhaps attempt to infiltrate a party close to your ideals. I'll say two things here. First of all, I'm not against people joining smaller parties. That can actually help, and I know that they're always desperate for members and for funding, even if it is your, $30 a year membership. But don't try that with one of the major parties. I've seen this a number of times over the years where people have joined. Mostly it's been the Liberal Party, but I know people have also joined the Labor Party. And, you join and, you're generally in alignment with each other. And then you start saying, oh, you know what? I think we should scale back free trade. Oh, I'm not so keen on immigration. And you get a letter. You get a letter from the central office and they say, here's your membership. All right? You've been expelled. So it doesn't work with the major parties. But for an independent candidate in a local election, you can actually achieve quite a lot. And you can actually find out about people in your local area. So that way you can find people who are aligned to you and people who you can actually form a grouping with. And even if you go for a candidate who's not that good, right? I'm not talking about one of the evil ones who we would never support ever, but, someone who's a little bit good, a little bit bad, a bit in the middle, that's all right. Because if that's the best candidate that there is, well, that's the best candidate that there is. You have to go with what exists, unless you're going to run yourself, of course. But, you actually, as I said, you get that practical experience, you get to meet people, and you get to suss them out, and you get experience. And I must say, once you actually go and have that experience, it's not necessarily easy. It's not hard either. It's not like it's grueling and soul-destroying, but you actually got to put the effort in. It's not something that just happens automatically. But you can form your own group. You can actually create your own organisation, and it doesn't have to be, oh no, I'm trying to create an organisation that rivals the Liberal Party. No, you're not. You're not. And what you should do in future is, once you've got your 3, 4, 5 people who are interested in doing things, then you can actually go to a candidate and say, hey, I've got some people who are happy to do letterboxing. I've got some people who are happy to write to the local newspaper. I've got people who are happy to hand out how to vote cards. And I tell you, that gets you a lot of credibility. All right, well, here's the second letter. And the letter is on the White Civil War. And Anita has written, utopian philosophy is better attributed to Sir Thomas More, author of Utopia, than to the Bible, which is not utopian. And on the surface, that's correct. But I want to dig under the surface. And when you look at Christianity holds out the promise of eternal life. But what happens when you are raised in a Christian environment, as people like Sir Thomas More were, and you have absorbed that, and it's deep within you. It's not a surface thing. It's something that you can't get rid of, even when you think you have gotten rid of it. But what happens when you actually begin to reject Christianity? Well, what happens is that those ideas are still there. They're on the surface they're gone, but underneath they're still bubbling away and they're still influencing your thinking. And today you could argue, and many do, that we live in a post-Christian society. But actually our morality is still Christian. And you'll hear people who are on the left, who are atheists, who reject God, even hate God, but the moral arguments that they make could actually be made by a Christian who uses the Bible, who quotes from the Bible to justify their beliefs. And the reason for that is because liberalism, the political philosophy that we live under, is a progressive ideology. And that means that it constantly changes. But it is based on Christianity. It comes from Christianity. And when liberalism said, hey, we're not going to be Christian anymore, we're going to have our own philosophy, that did not mean that they rejected the deep understanding of Christianity. It means that they absorbed it, but they have forgotten that they have absorbed it. They've forgotten that that is the basis upon which their philosophy is actually built. So when you reject Christianity, you also reject the promise of eternal life. You reject the idea of heaven. There is no heaven. There is no afterlife. So what that means is that you have to build the best life you can in this life, because there is no other. And what that means is that many people, including liberals, actually want to create heaven on earth. And what do we call a heaven on earth? We call it utopia. And Sir Thomas More's Utopia is filled with Christian themes, even though it's not a Christian place. Actually, I think in Utopia he does say it's a Christian place, but it's so bizarre that I think actual Christians would have a very hard time living there. So utopian ideas come from the Bible, even though the Bible doesn't. The Bible absolutely rejects that. The Bible says heaven comes after life, after you've died, and utopians say no. We can create utopia here. We can create heaven on earth here, and not only can we, but we have to, because there's no other option. You can't die and go to heaven because it's not there. Because all of the political philosophies, including liberalism, are a replacement for religion. But they all come from religion. They're based, the very foundation of all of their thinking is Christian. So I hope that has cleared that up. Sometimes I take complex subjects and I can simplify them, and occasionally I do the opposite. So I hope I've done the first here. And I probably should comment on Portland Co-op. He said that I should upload at a better time than I do. I usually put it on at midnight, which is the start of the new day. And he suggested that I put it on at a better time. Well, I did an experiment over 48 days, and it didn't quite work out to that because of the lockdown. I lost about 4 days, so about 44 days it actually worked. And the only slight upturn I saw was early evening, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, but not massively. And so I have gone back to midnight. I am thinking of trying out, 7 or 8 p.m. again, just to see whether that is worthwhile. But at this time, I haven't 100% decided to do that. But it was certainly a worthwhile experiment. I'm going to finish up by talking about a third comment that I've received. This is from 555, and he wrote on why do people keep voting the same way. He said, way more Australians agree with Pauline Hanson than vote for her. You can get a foot in as a minor, but that's it. The rank failure of Cory Bernardi's Oz Conservative breakaway is a great example of voters unwilling to vote for them. He was a high flyer in the Liberal Party, the populist, but voters know they're not going to get in or be effective and feel they're wasting their vote, so just stick with the mains. It's not necessarily a rejection of what the breakaway is saying. They more likely agree but won't vote. It's a very interesting comment there, and again, I'll break it up. Way more Australians agree with Pauline Hanson than vote for her. Well, I think that's true, but I think the problem with Pauline Hanson, I think the problem with a lot of these parties, is that people agree with some aspects but not others. You can get a foot in as a minor, but that's it. And yes, that's what we keep seeing, isn't it? We keep seeing that minor parties do get a foot in, or at least can, but they don't rise to the next step. They find a niche, and that's it. They stay there. The rank failure of Cory Bernardi's Oz Conservative breakaway is a great example of voters' unwillingness to vote for them. I think there's a problem with all of these parties, Pauline Hanson as well, Cory Bernardi, is that they're what I referred to earlier. They're more hardcore liberals. They're not really breaking away from liberalism. So they don't actually offer a real alternative from the major parties. You're just voting for a more right-wing version, if you will, of the Liberal Party. And in fact, if Pauline Hanson or Cory Bernardi were Prime Minister and they were the head of their respective parties, what would their immigration policy be? I'm not sure. And that's a problem. And it is an issue because you have to choose. You can't alienate people, but at the same time, if you're not prepared to alienate people, how can you actually energise your base? And you see the Liberal and Labor parties, and the Greens do this. They purposely reject something that their opponents are proposing, and the reason that they do that is to energise their base, to actually get people to say, hey, there's a clear choice between these two groups, and I'm gonna make it of my vote count, because I'm going to say yes to what my people are saying and no to what our opponents are saying. But these minor parties, I don't think that they actually make that go that extra step to do that. He was a high flyer in the Liberal Party, the populist. Well, that was true. He probably could have risen higher in the Liberal Party. But voters know they're not going to get in or be effective and feel they're wasting their vote, so just stick with the mains. Well, maybe people do feel they're wasting their votes, but if you're voting for the Liberals or the Labor, you are wasting your vote, because these people are leading us to ruin. So voting for these people is a waste. Now, I live in a very left-wing electorate, and the southern portion of it is very SJW. It used to be, before the 60s, say, white working class, and then it became migrant working class, and now those people have died, and their children have moved away and sought new housing, and in their place has moved in A lot of they're Aussies primarily, but they're lefties, and so it's like going to Fitzroy. It's very, very left wing. You walk past the shop fronts and you'll see signs for progressive causes and so forth. So that's the kind of electorate that I live in, but I don't vote for Labor. But actually that's where my vote ends up. And here, for some reason, even though it's a safe Labor seat, the Greens have come close to taking it. So it could at some point turn into a Green seat. Everyone else is an outlier. Nobody stands a chance of getting close to winning. But for some reason, there's always 6, 7, 8, 9 candidates running here. And apart from 2 of them, none of them stand a chance. So, I vote for the most right-wing I can find. And usually the Liberal Party runs a candidate, and I know he's not going to win, but I'll vote for him. And then, who would I rather vote for, Labor or the Greens? So I end up voting for Labor and then put the Greens last. And I think the Animal Justice Party usually goes last. And when it's all counted, I voted Labor, because that's how our system of voting works in Australia. You vote for 10 candidates, one gets knocked out, and then all the votes from that 10th candidate are redistributed, and then whoever's 9th gets knocked out, and so forth, until you end up with 2, and then all the votes get distributed to them, and then one of them's the winner. And I sometimes wonder to myself, is it even worth voting? But I think it is. I heard during the week William Pierce, the American white nationalist, who was very, very big in the 80s and 90s, and he apparently popularised the phrase, we're not going to vote our way out of this. But actually he was a registered voter, and he always voted. So I think we have to accept that politics is not the only way that we can fight, and not the only avenue that we can do things in, but actually we still have to be involved on that battlefield. We have to be involved in as many fights as we can. And that's something that we should pick up from the left. This is something you see on the left. It doesn't matter what issue it is. You go to a meeting, you go to a heritage meeting, or you go to a meeting about water resources, or you go to any kind of meeting, and you'll find leftists there, because that's what the left does. The left puts their finger in every pie. They make sure that they're always involved in everything, and that's what we have to do as well, including in voting. It's not necessarily a rejection of what the breakaway is saying. They're more likely agree but won't vote. And, I think that's one of the issues that I have with going for Senate seats and for trying to get into the House of Representatives. People don't know who they are. They don't really, they don't trust them. Liberal and Labor, you pretty much know what they stand for, even if you don't agree with them. You know what to expect. Liberal government came to power. Well, I sort of know what's going to happen. Labor's got in. Yeah, I sort of know what's going to happen. Pauline Hanson's now the state government of Queensland. Whoa, what's going to happen? I don't know. And, if they had experience in local government, then people would know. People wouldn't be so scared, and they wouldn't be so intimidated by that idea of letting somebody new in. And I really think that local government is an area that we have to pay more attention to, even though it's not as glamorous as we'd like. All right, well, We're nearly at the half-hour mark, so I'm going to leave it there. If you'd like to support my work, you can by going to Subscribestar, and the link will be in the description box below. Have a good day, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye-bye.